So I've been kind of slamming healing in Dragonflight Season 2 for a good while now, and a lot of the feedback I've gotten on videos and on streams is that people were generally unhappy with healing in Season 2 of Dragonflight, particularly in Mythic Plus. Blizzard has definitely heard the player base, and last week they gave us a glimpse of what's to come for healers in Dragonflight Season 3, so in this video we're going to take a look at these changes and ask the question, is this enough to breathe new life into the healer role in WoW Mythic Plus? I don't think that's going to be a super easy feat. The dip in the player base during Dragonflight, despite it being a well-received expansion, has been pretty well documented as of late. There is an abundance of good games out there right now. WoW players have plenty of choices anytime they're unhappy with the season. So we're going to look at all the big picture changes first, and first and foremost that would be the mana management. Blizzard said healers have a lot of decisions and resources to manage that change depending on the type of content you are doing. At its core, we want healers to have interesting abilities and choices to make while healing, and we want you to have to manage your mana pool. We're hoping our changes reduce the amount of overhealing and make mana matter slightly more, which should make healing across the game a more enjoyable experience. And then kind of the second part of this, single target healing spells currently don't feel like they move the health bar enough. We want these heals to be impactful and have a purpose, and hope this makes healing Mythic Plus dungeon less stressful for healers. We're just going to kind of jump to the end here. Mana generation is a problem that's related to all the above. We want mana to feel like a finite resource, and for the few ways you can still generate mana to be relevant, but we want your spell choices during a raid fight to matter. We're reducing the effectiveness of many mana restoration class abilities and specific items. Please test this, yada yada. Okay. So I have mixed feelings about mana management. From a raid encounter perspective, mana management should be part of the skill of healing the fight, I agree. Healers shouldn't have unlimited resources to keep the group alive. From a Mythic Plus perspective, I actually think mana management is kind of boring and tedious. When really only one of the 5 players are concerned with a finite resource, that leaves 4 people sitting around while the healer drinks. I don't really think that's fun gameplay. In the past, this problem was often mitigated by seasonal affixes that provided a lot of mana or mana regen. Well, seasonal affixes are gone now, and there was no announcement that they were coming back, so while I like and agree with the idea of managing mana in raid, I feel like there needs to be some way to make it less of a big deal in dungeons. And also, when it comes to mana issues, all specs have definitely not been created equal. If mana is going to be a thing, it needs to be a thing for everybody, not just some specs and not others. If it is balanced, I can live with mana management in Mythic Plus. So the other really big picture change as you look through the patch notes is the theme of big buffs to rotational healing spells and nerfs to cooldowns. Druid is a prime example of this, where practically every regular healing spell is getting buffed by 20% or more, while Flourish is taking a huge nerf, and we see this across pretty much every single healing spec. The blue post mostly refers to raids, but this was actually something I brought up in my I Quit Healing video, and on the surface I like the direction of this change a lot. I've felt like my rotational healing spells do next to nothing, and really only cooldowns do any impactful healing, which kind of turned dungeon healing into just long periods of sort of doing nothing and then super high pressure cooldown time, which is not a very fun way to play, and as they mentioned before, pretty stressful. So while I like the idea here, when it comes to Mythic Plus, we're definitely going to have to see how the damage profiles of the dungeons interact with these changes. So I think it's a nice idea, but I'm in wait and see mode to see how Blizzard actually pulls it off. I don't want to get too into specific balance changes too much, as these are just initial numbers that are likely going to change a lot before the patch is released. I mean, if you read some of these tier sets, I swear there's got to be some typos in there, but what I do want to get into are the changes to Disc Priest. In my opinion, this was the most interesting change of the whole patch notes so far. I love Disc, I love the idea of healing through damage, and I've played it a pretty good amount this expansion. I feel like it's one of, if not the most fun healers at the moment, but without question, the damage rotation is just way too complicated and bloated. You've got all these mini cooldowns like Solace, Shadow Covenant, Schism to manage while you're keeping track of things like your Harsh Discipline stacks, and it just feels like Blizzard wants Disc to be the hard healer, like it's been known for being for quite a while, and making the spec complicated just for complicated's sake. I love what they're doing in the rotation, like removing Solace entirely, baking Mind Blast and Schism into a single spell on a longer cooldown. Obviously, target dummies on PTR only get us so far, and we'll need to actually take the spec for a spin in some dungeons and raids to see how it really pans out, but I'm loving the idea behind these changes, and it's making me really excited to try out some Disc in Season 3. Other big changes to Priests are coming in the form of Power Infusion and Mass Dispel. For Mass Dispel, Blizzard says we're reducing the frequency that Priests have access to Mass Dispel as the value of the spell is exceeding the value of other utility at its current power level and cooldown. We're looking to allow for more situations where magic debuffs are applied to multiple players without having a priest trivializing the intended difficulty of the mechanics. So as a result, Mass Dispel's cooldown is now 2 minutes from 45 seconds. And I think Blizzard really missed the mark here. And they've missed the mark on Mass Dispel all expansion long. They nerfed Shadow Priest's damage super hard because I guess they didn't understand that it was actually Mass Dispel that was making them a requirement in dungeons, and now they're hammering the spell when in reality they just need to stop making so much content where 2 or more magic debuffs are going out all the time. They do address this in the blue text, but honestly, Mass Dispel should have its usual small handful of useful moments throughout a dungeon pool or raid, and not be an absolute necessity in 2/3 of the dungeons. As long as you can design encounters that don't all require Mass Dispel, I think the spell is pretty much fine. Now, on to Power Infusion. The developers note here, Power Infusion has proved to be too impactful due to how it stacks with cooldowns on specializations that excel at dealing damage in a short window. We're reducing its duration and amplitude to balance our burst classes and keep them more in line with steady state damage dealers. Power Infusion, the haste was reduced to 20% from 25, and the duration reduced from 15 from 20. Again, I feel like the mark was missed here a bit. I've mained Priest on and off the last few years, and I personally would love to just trade out PI for some utility and personal DPS. PI is kind of a toxic spell, and it forces certain Priest and DPS combos into the meta, adds a ton of DPS to a group that isn't really represented for the Priest. I feel like just nerfing PI by a little bit doesn't really solve any of the problems created by the spell. This change, along with the Mass Dispel nerf, is hitting Priests in a place where it really hurts their utility. I'd love to see Priests get a more traditional utility kit personally, like a kick, practical AoE CC, a real defensive, something like that. I'd be happy to give up PI to get it too. I'd worry about that a little bit because PI might also be the only thing helping Priests compete with Bloodlust and B-Res specs, but the spell itself is not a ton of fun to play with. I think the thing Blizzard needs to do a better job of, if they want healers or just players in general to return to Dragonflight, if they dipped out at some point in Season 2 or maybe never even got started with the expansion, is to release a really strong dungeon pool. So the Season 3 pool was revealed to be the 2 Dawn of the Infinites dungeon, Darkheart Thicket, Blackrook Hold, Waycrest Manor, Ataldazar, Everbloom, and Throne of the Tides. This in and of itself doesn't really mean much to me. It all comes down to the changes Blizzard makes to the dungeons and how they tune them. I think right out of the gate, a pool of 8 dungeons gets stale kind of quickly, and I'd love to get back to the sweet spot of 10 personally. I don't even really want to speculate what's going to be hard or easy out of this pool. Remember how everyone was worried about Underrot going into Season 2? Yeah, it's not the dungeon so much as how Blizzard decides to tune it and the timer that they put on it. One of the biggest failures of Season 2 dungeon pool was the fact that the same type of utility was needed over and over in a lot of the dungeons, like Mass Dispel and bleed removals. This created a really boring static meta. Also, I think the last piece of the puzzle of making a good Mythic Plus season comes down to the wild card Augmentation Evoker. There were no patch notes for the spec, and I think that likely means we're going to be seeing a massive change to the spec incoming before Season 3. I love the idea of a support spec, but the way it was implemented kind of broke the game. I do not want to see AUG watered down into just another DPS spec, but I think the survivability it provides needs to be seriously tuned down or removed pretty much completely. As someone who pushed AUG into the mid-20s last season, it does kind of pain me to say that, but AUG just gives the group way too much in Mythic Plus. As long as an AUG is a requirement in every group, Mythic Plus is not going to be in a healthy spot. So is what we see here enough to excite healers for Season 3? I think it's a good start with some moves going in the right direction and clear evidence that the community is being heard. Big picture, it's going to come down to making a better dungeon pool and coming up with a real solution to the augmentation evoker problem for Blizzard to deliver a great Season 3 of Dragonflight. So what do you think, guys? Leave me a comment down below. Are you excited for Season 3? Are you planning to come back and heal some dungeons? If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to see more of my content in the future, and don't forget to check out my stream here on YouTube. It is without question the best donkey-themed, healing-centric World of Warcraft stream in pretty much the entire world. It's Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, 9 p.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there sometime. Until the next one, guys, happy healing.